It's working on presenting. Okay, can you guys see it? You can?
I can.
Okay, perfect. Alrighty, so we're gonna start with Neil. So looks like based off this resume I can see here, looks like you're a graphic designer / web designer. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
Good. All right, Ashley, what are your thoughts overall starting out?
So starting off with a positive, it's a nice clean layout. It's a nice graphic design layout resume or laid out resume. So I really like the layout of it. I would say my first piece of feedback would be your most recent position, just because you've been there for so long, is maybe to include a little more detail within that area, what you've done there. I know a lot of people want to keep everything, on one page. And so I'm sure that was part of the goal here. And so a way of maybe doing that is removing that reference portion, and then maybe just putting references available upon request or something like that. And then it would give you a lot more space to add some additional details to your current position.
Okay. That's feedback I've gotten recently as well.
Yeah, I'd say that's good, especially since you've been here at this particular job for so long. And if you're looking to get more into like web design and outside of the world of graphic design, which I don't know if that's, your intention, like you want to be in web development, then really expanding on what you did as a web manager would be fantastic, because, this your most recent position, this stuff, while still important, isn't what you're looking to go into anymore, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Right. What I'm looking at is moving maybe into UI, UX, or just more digital in general.
Yeah, and highlighting any projects that you've been a part of, in the last 13 years. I think if you could add, any big projects you've been a part of or work that you're proud of. And I'm sure, there's a portfolio one can go to as well. But sometimes hiring managers I don't know the exact number, but they say they only spend a certain number of seconds looking at a resume before they move on. So really quickly, you've got to put some information there that will catch one's attention. And another piece of feedback I thought, under your skills, you list out, a lot of different programs that you have experience with. You might actually include that over in the work experience section as well, showing where you've used those or how you've used them and what capacity.
Okay.
That would also give you something to kind of beef up that first area.
Yeah, I think that'd be good too, especially with, wanting to get into UI UX and, using your skills within web development with HTML and your WordPress. Putting that in here would be really great, because, people can guess based off of this, create, manage multiple websites, that it's probably WordPress. You're probably doing HTML and UI UX, but when I think of myself, when I started in recruiting and when I started in this area, I wasn't able to make those connections when I first began recruiting. So if you've unfortunately found somebody like me when I first started, I wouldn't have been able to make that connection. So, but at this stage, after doing it for so long, you're like, oh, okay, got it. But you wanted to take as many questions out as possible.
Okay. So we're looking for more clarity and detail, specifically in my most recent position.
Yes.
Okay.
Especially since that's what you want to go into. And any achievement-oriented things you can put in there would be really fantastic too, because these are very task-focused. Like, I create websites, I manage a team, I supervise a graphic designer. So those are all very tasks. But if you could put anything in there like saved the company X amount of dollars or increased revenue by X amount through my WordPress things I did, that would be really great as well. And anything that you could do to quantify this would be fantastic. Like, I see you create, manage multiple websites. Well, how many? Because if you're managing 15 websites and a company's like, well, I need somebody to manage 10, then they're gonna be like, wow, this guy's amazing. He already manages 15. He's gonna hit the ground running. Boom, he's great. But if there's a company who's like, we need this person to manage 50, then maybe this person wouldn't be the best person in that case, sort of thing.
Okay. Yeah, some of the quantification is hard just because we're a nonprofit. And so we don't really track a lot of that, but some of it I can easily quantify. When it comes to dollars, it's harder.
That's so hard.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Okay.
It's
Great.
so hard. One suggestion I usually have for that is it kind of goes back to what Kristen said at the very beginning. And I don't know if we were live or not, but she said her dad worked in HR. So he would always tell her, update your resume every single month. So something that can help with that is if I have like a book of achievements where every time I do something that's really awesome, I write it down. That way, if I'm looking to look for a job in a year or 2 or 3, I'll have that book of achievements that I can just whip out with all the great things I did. And it's easier to track those numbers down to quantify things right after it happens instead of, I wonder how much money I saved the company 3 years ago when I did that one project.
You know, and one thing you could do, I ended up just making like a folder in my email. So if there's an achievement of the foundation, let's say that because you created a new donor link that helped raise $100,000 for the foundation, that's that quantifiable aspect. So that would kind of make it different. If any of you are looking for jobs in the nonprofit realm, technology is allowing us to raise money in different ways. And so if you were going to a place, they may not see it as, oh, you saved them, but you helped them get that money. Or if you're at a business, because I'll just pull this out, like let's say you were working for Sonic, and because you worked on the Sonic app, they received so much revenue throughout the year because of app purchases. Putting that information, because if that app wasn't created and maintained, then that money wouldn't have been there.
Overall, though, I think this is fantastic experience, especially since you've got, you know, leadership experience in here too, because you're supervising a junior graphic designer, and that's fantastic. I love that. And you're directing a team. That's fantastic. That's another thing you could quantify, like how big is your team there? Looks like you manage one junior graphic designer.
Yes.
Okay.
And then, yeah. And then as far as a team of communications professionals, I kind of art direct 2 of them. They're writers, but I kind of help them with design.
Nice. Good.
And you have fantastic tenure. I love that you've listed all of these accolades you've received over the years. I think that's really nice to highlight if you have the room on your resume, which you do.
Yes, I love that. I love that you have awards at every company you've been at, because that to me says that you're a person who doesn't do the bare minimum. You try to do more than what's asked of you, because I mean, I don't know what you have to do to win this award at this company, but the fact that you have it seems really fantastic, and that's really exciting. And I like that you have your certificates down here too.
That's kind of that's been this year's project. All the certifications.
Same, I need to. Yeah. Overall, though, it's a really fantastic resume. And, you know, also, I think I can tell that you tried to stick to just one page, which is, I think, what we've been taught, like in college and things like that. But given how much experience you have, like you're not a fresh college graduate. So feel free to go to a page and a half, because after looking at so many resumes per day, very rarely do I see somebody stay to one page. That's pretty rare now, especially if you have so much experience. Now, if you were a fresh college grad, then one page, perfect.
Okay.
And you'll rarely hear a hiring manager say, oh, their resume's over one page. There's no way I would consider them. You know, I don't think that's the norm anymore, but it used to be. You had to cram everything on one page. So I think getting the word out there that a 2-page resume is okay. It's absolutely okay.
And one thing I wanted to point out, because I know we removed Neil's personal information, I believe you had a link to a website of your own, maybe with your portfolio.
Yes.
So one thing to mention, just because I knew it had been removed, was, you know, for anyone, GitHub, your portfolio, something that demonstrates your work,
Yes.
that can always be on there if you feel like you. I always hate when, like, I've had a resume that's like a page and a quarter, and you're like, this is, I'm not going to submit this quarter. Like, I either need to remove it or just accept the quarter. But by having that additional location to find your skills capabilities is good. And we had a question in the chat kind of pertaining to Neil's resume. So in addition to weaving in your skills into the project experience, do you still recommend having this list too? I've heard it can help when people are doing a quick scan of your resume, but I've also heard on the flip side of that, since it's already an experience, a separate list of skills is wording and doesn't add much. So what are your thoughts on that?
I would absolutely say I love the skills lists. That's definitely a go-to, especially if someone's doing a Boolean search. It's just really easy to pull up a resume and find those keywords very quickly. I wouldn't hesitate to put it in there twice. You know, if you're listing it out in skills, you're really expanding on that. Or I'm sorry, if you list it out under your experience, you're really expanding on that skill list. So I'll let Cecily chime in, but I think it's okay. I don't think it's redundant to do that by any means.
Yeah. Resumes are funny because you can show your resume to 10 different people and you'll get 10 different answers. So I'd say even everything that we say, like, take what you like about what we say and then just leave the rest of it because everybody has a different opinion. I agree with Ashley. I think if you have these skills here, so HTML, you know, I like to see some details as far as what you've done with HTML in here. Because, I mean, I'm guessing it's related to the websites, but I also know graphic designers can sometimes use that to create really fantastic designs. So is that where you get that from? And, you know, expanding on it. Now, if you just listed those skills under that job, it would be redundant. Like if you just copy and pasted it over here without any details of what you did. But I think I'm with that. I would say it's not redundant. Yeah.
And something I wanted to touch on really quickly that Kristen mentioned was, you know, when you get your resume and you're just into that second page, and so now you have a page and a quarter or something like that, and you have this tons of blank space. Play around with the margins. You don't want to cram everything into where it's just you can't really make anything out and figure out, you know, each section, but you'd be shocked when you play around with the margins. You can get it back to one page or even kind of get it to a page and a half if you need to make the margins a little shorter and things like that. So
yeah,
just a tidbit.
In the interest of time, because we have both Dan and Keith still here, I was wondering maybe let's have Neil provide us any thoughts or final questions, and then we might switch to the next person so that we just make sure we cover each one.
Just thanks. I think those are good good points to think about, and I'll definitely expand that out. I think that's probably what my resume needs more than anything. So I appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing with us.
Thanks.
Another thing that can help with spacing issues too is playing with the spacing between paragraphs or between sections of your resume.
Good point.
In visually, there's not a lot of difference between an 8-point font and a 15-point font on the space between sections, but they can definitely reflow your whole resume. That's one way that I had kept my resume to one page, is I decreased the margins and played with the spaces between sections, and it completely reflowed my resume, allowed me to get a lot more information on one page. But playing with that doesn't affect the visual effect of it, but it can definitely affect the flow.
And the other thing I would add to that is, you know, I think Neil being a graphic designer, I'm sure he did not use Word to make that, which one is smart. And then two, that's a whole nother thing that maybe we can loop back at the end after we've looked at all three of them, is the using Photoshop or InDesign versus using Word. But at what point do you want to add that headache to your life if that's not your daily thing? Because I'm like, Neil works in that every day. So I would be like, of course he has like a super nice thing that made it Word.
Yeah, that's a great point. It depends on the program you're using as well.
Yeah, I did it in InDesign, and then I exported it as an interactive PDF. So all the links actually work like a web page link, just to make it as easy as possible for people viewing it.
Neil might have to put in Slack some of the some YouTube videos to help people.
We could just touch on this for a really long time.
Okay, next one up. I'm doing these in a random order. So we got Daniel. Doing like a quick little, you guys can see it, right?
I'll start us off and just say, I love this resume.
She did. She said she was
I
going to
feel differently.
over it.
Yeah. I was like, I kind of fangirled over this resume a little bit. So I had a lot of positives. But one piece I thought was important to touch on is if you look at the profile section, or a lot of resumes will call it an objective statement or something along those lines. I love the way this is listed or written out. I actually tell people sometimes to just take off their objective statement because it just adds no value to their resume if they just put a pretty standard statement. But yours really highlights your skill set and your experience. So if someone has something like that or can put something together like that, I love it. I think that's fantastic.
Awesome.
I also, under your technical skills, I love how you have them listed out, front end, back end, non-development related, or if it's non-language. I really like how that's broken down. It's just really easy to read that way.
Yep.
Awesome.
I 110% agree. Like, I see a lot of profiles here that are things like what Ashley said, the standard, like looking for a job as a software developer. And you're like, okay. But you have genuine value in here, like results-oriented full stack developer with experience in X, Y, Z. And so, right, like the very first sentence says everything you need to know. And I love that. Something I've seen some people do, and I think this is kind of mixed as far as if people like it or not. I personally like it, but they will go through and they'll like bold these things, which just makes it your eyes draw to it. But I mean, that's just purely opinion of some people. I like it, others don't. So
Yeah, I like that.
I don't mind that at all either when people highlight keywords. And then also, just depending, I didn't get much of a background on, if you were to be seeking employment, what you would be seeking and all of that. I would say in some scenarios, I might have flipped the work experience section and the projects section. However, if what your projects highlight are geared more towards the role or the type of position that you're searching for, I would say leave it this way.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I'm going
Okay.
into my first software engineering position, so my work experience has all been not in software engineering, and those
Okay.
projects are sites I design and stuff. So that's why I have it.
Yes, then I would leave it like that. I think that that's listed out well then.
I also weirdly liked that you had this down here. I don't think I see very many people do that, but when I saw you had this in your resume, I genuinely read it because I was like, oh, what have other people said about him? And like, that's not something you see very often in a resume. So I appreciated it.
Yeah, that's another one. If you have the space to do something like that, I think it's fantastic. It's not 100%, you have to have that on there. So if someone didn't have space, not a big deal. But the fact that you had the space for it, I think it does make it stand out, and it shows, just some accomplishments there.
And I also like that yours is really well quantified, like facilitated a QA process, resulting errors from 15% down to 2%. Those things are absolutely amazing. I would say trying to like gear this as much as you can towards your next step, which your next step is you want a job in software engineering.
Correct.
Right? Okay.
Mhm.
So put as much at the very top as you can that's as relevant to that as possible. Like the first thing you have is that you worked remotely, and that's great, especially given the remote world we all live in now. But I'd be more interested in this because you've worked with the QA team and you got errors down from 15% to 2%. So rather than having somebody like dig for it in the resume, just make it the very first one.
Okay.
Because that's really amazing experience. I'm reading it as I go too. Yeah. And I also really like that you had these here under each of your projects as well, because it's pretty common that I see people have their GitHub, and I love that because then I can look at it. But you also have YouTube videos that kind of do a little demonstration of it, and I thought that was really unique, and I really appreciated that as well.
And I like that you've included a link to the specific section of your GitHub profile for each project. I know not everyone has the capacity to do that on a resume, but the fact that you did, I like that a lot.
Yeah. I feel like we're not super helpful. We're like, I like this.
I know it's a very good resume. It really is.
I also like that you had a blog. I wanted to check it out before we came here. But this is something HR professionals really like to see too, that you genuinely write about the things you're passionate about. And I didn't get a chance to look at it, but HR professionals really love that, that you take it that extra step.
Dan, I'm curious to know, since you said this is the first job you're applying for, how long have you been looking for a job, or are you just getting started? And what have you been applying for and maybe not hearing back?
So I graduated from a boot camp. So I've been looking for about 4 months, very, very actively. So I've applied to about 50 jobs. And as I apply, I reach out to the recruiters and try to find a hiring manager or just somebody in the engineering team and connect on LinkedIn if I can. So I've been applying, my first jobs, I've been applying to entry-level roles. So if I see something that's interesting to me that has at least most of the requirements I satisfy, and it says 3 years of experience or less, that's what I'm applying for. And have not heard too much back from a lot of them, and have not had much success in getting an interview.
You just started looking in April?
Yeah, April or May.
And now, Dan, I believe you're not from the Oklahoma City area, right? You're not
No.
from Oklahoma.
Charleston.
So, I don't know. That's what I'm saying. Maybe you need to move to Oklahoma.
I actually love that idea.
If you want a job, I'm sure they
certainly.
can help.
And it's so tough because you hear those stories so often. I want to get a job in development. I have XYZ experience, but I don't have a ton of experience in the actual work. And I hate to blame things on COVID, but it is just it's a tough time to be looking for a position. But also junior developers, until they get that first 1 to 2 years of experience in the workplace, it is just tough to find something. I wish I had some valuable feedback on that part of it, but it's just hard. You'll be invaluable, and once you get that year or two under your belt, and just hang in there. I don't know if you're active on Twitter. I love following everyone in the tech world on Twitter, and you see every day, I've been looking for a job for a year, I finally found something, or I've looked for 6 months, I finally found something after 100 applications, or yep. So I know it's just tough out there for junior developers to find something. And so my only piece of advice there would just be keep doing what you're doing and hang in there. You do have a good resume. It can't be your resume.
Awesome.
I would agree. And it's really tough to find that first position. It gets easier after that. And so that's fantastic. It's just making it to that step. But based off what you said you're doing, I think you're doing all the right things. It's just going to be a matter of timing until it eventually clicks. And it doesn't click until it does. You'll get 100 rejections for one yes. And it just takes that one yes to make up for everything else that happened.
Yep. Yeah, the COVID probably makes it harder, but it also opens up a ton of remote opportunities, so I can apply all over the country instead of being stuck with just what's in Charleston. So if you have any Oklahoma companies that are looking,
we'll
in.
Keep an eye out.
Ashley's ears. Okay. How are we doing on time? Should we go to Keith?
Yeah.
Well, thanks, guys.
Thank you, Dan. We appreciate it.
Thank you for sharing.
And keep us posted, and please look in the jobs channel of the Techlahoma Slack if you haven't, because I have seen a couple of people posting remote opportunities. I think it is opening up some people's views as to who they'll hire. And then I know just from some of the organizations I get to work with, if I know they're hiring and it's purely remote, I try to put them in the jobs channel.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Can you guys see my screen? For Keith? Okay. Alrighty. So funny enough, the first thing I just noticed, which I didn't notice this until just now because we were just talking with Dan about this, but I didn't notice that he didn't have a professional summary until we just said it. So I think that just shows how much I look at them or don't look at them.
Right. Right. I just noticed his because he had some good keywords, and so that's just another thing that I would say it's not 100% necessary to have on the resume anymore.
But when done well, they're great. So
Yeah, agreed.
I love this top section here because this makes it super clean and easy. Like I obviously took out your personal information, but sometimes when going through resumes, it's difficult to find this information because sometimes they'll put it like down here at the very bottom, and I pull out a resume to call somebody and I'm like, oh, I don't have their phone number. And then turns out I do. It was just in a different spot. So first of all, that was great. I love that. And I like that you have these links easily available too, like right at the top.
Yeah, I listed that as well as something that I really liked. And we've talked about it before, but anytime you can highlight your work and provide those types of links to a portfolio, GitHub profile, those are fantastic things. I've heard of hiring managers who won't even interview somebody if they don't have a GitHub account on their resumes. So have a GitHub. I would say my first piece of feedback on this one is there's just a lot of information on one page. And because, again, not to beat a dead horse, but it's okay to have more than one page on your resume. I would say on this one, you could even play with the margins a little bit and get it back to 2 pages. I totally understand why you've done it this way is because everyone wants it to be 1 page, or if they think that a hiring manager
that's been beaten in my head.
Yeah, no, I completely understand that. It's hard to get the word out there anymore. Everybody thinks it needs to be 1 page, but I would definitely, because you have so many great skills and you've listed out a lot of fantastic information, it's okay if it's on 2 pages. So that would be one thing that I would suggest is to really kind of break down those sections and put some good spacing in between so you can kind of read through it a little bit easier.
Okay.
Will you scroll down to the bottom? Something else I really liked. Oh, I loved your skills section as well. I like how you have yours listed with years of experience. So I've seen on resumes where people try to do this and it doesn't work very well because they just have it listed in one column and it takes up, a page or 2 of just, there's a lot of empty space, but I love that you have the 3 columns here and you have it listed out based on your years of experience. I think that's fantastic.
That's one thing that I've been really particular about is maintaining that format so it doesn't run together.
Yeah, I really liked that. And I love within your descriptions of each position, you have the languages that you've worked with, you list out projects, and so you have really good information actually on the resume. I think a lot of this would just be a little bit more on the formatting side.
Yeah. I also love that you have some volunteer experience within, Tulsa in the things that you love too. Like you're doing your volunteer for Code for Tulsa. I'd be curious about, so if you were looking to go to 2 pages and if you want more information in there, I'd be curious to know like what you did for Code for Tulsa, just because I have a weird bias towards, I love people who volunteer for things. So that's just like something that pulls at my personal heart. But thinking of that for like other HR professionals who are looking at your resume as well, there's going to be other HR professionals who that pulls at their heartstrings too. And they're like, I love that. Like anytime I see somebody who volunteers for OKWit to like get young kids ages like 10 to 18 into technology, I'm like, oh, I love that. I love
Yeah, that's actually kind of my direction that I'm going in is doing more of that. And I've been working with Kim and some of the others in Techlahoma to get into that direction of teaching kids.
Mm-hmm.
So
I love that.
That's fantastic. It's great.
There went my heartstrings. I kind of figured based off of this, you have a young professionals thing in there too, where you're a member. So I like that. And similar to what Ashley said, I love that you have the years of experience that you have things for too, because like Ashley said, sometimes when I'm looking at a resume, there's a long list of skills, and they'll have everything they've ever touched, which is great. But then I call them because I'm looking for a C# developer, but that's actually what they have the least amount of experience in. But I wouldn't know that based off their resume. With yours, it'd be super clear. Oh, you've got the most experience in that. Good. That's fantastic. Whereas Python, you've got the least. But, you know, if Python's
Yeah.
only a teeny bit, perfectly fine. That's great. And I
Actually, I need to
love-
refill those sections because those are off, but neither here nor there. I just realized that as you're highlighting stuff, I'm like, actually, that needs to move over. And
And you know, I think Kristen said this as well, but I don't remember if we were live. Have somebody else look at your resume after you finish. When you're putting together a resume, you are staring at the same bit of information for a long period of time, and you're adjusting your margins and spell checking and trying to remember all of those projects and, you know, the languages that you have experience in. After a while, it all starts to run together. You either walk away from it for a while and come back and look at it again, but I highly suggest having a friend, a peer, someone look over it for you, just to have that fresh set of eyes. And spell check is obviously lovely as well.
Yep. I'm a victim of that. I applied to a job and I got the job, but then I looked at my resume afterwards and realized I had like flipped 2 words around and was like, wow, I'm really glad that they forgave me for that. It happens. It will always happen. It just does. But I also love how you quantify things in here too, like savings of 40 to 60% in time and $35,000 weekly. Like, to me, that says that you are a problem solver. If you see a problem, you are going to help fix it. And I love that, rather than, you know, task-oriented resumes. It's just like, they might be a problem solver, they might not, but at least I know their skill set. But this to me says you're going to find a problem and you're going to fix it. And I love that.
yeah, that's actually one of my focuses in most things, is finding those little nagging inefficiencies in processes and trying to smooth them out. So
I'd say overall, lots of great information in the resume.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Yeah.
Keith, I have a question. So,
Okay.
first off, I used to work at WGU, so go Night Owls, and which is super random, so that's why I had to say it. But I was curious. I see you're currently working on your bachelor's degree. Are you looking for a position or that would kind of use that bachelor's degree using software development and your skills to get to the next job? And kind of with that in mind, are there any questions you had for whatever that goal is?
yeah, so one of the bits of feedback I've gotten, as opposed to regular or other languages or other frameworks, specifically .NET and C# jobs, the type of companies that are in general using .NET and C# are a lot of times your older type of companies. And so the bit of feedback that I've gotten repeatedly over the last 2 years I've been looking is, oh, well, your experience is great, but I mean, I don't see that you've got any kind of a degree or anything in computer science. That Microsoft stack space is cluttered with that old idea that you have to have a degree in something to be successful or prove that you're good enough. So that's really what's driving me towards that, is kind of, let's eliminate that.
Well, and not to overly plug WGU, but because I very much believe in the way that the university is set up.
Yes.
You might want to share, since a lot of people don't know how WGU is set up, why they're to go get your degree, and what are you getting out of your program that's beyond your degree? Because I know that's part of it.
Yeah. One of the main things actually that drove me to WGU is they're one of the only colleges that I've found that specifically teaches C#. Java's common, Python common, but or C++, some of the earlier languages common, but C# is actually really hard to find a focus in. And it doesn't really matter that it's focused in it per se. A lot of the concepts, core concepts, cross apply between programming languages. But that's kind of one of the things that I was gung ho about, is that the college that I wanted to go to should have a focus in that. That was the number one driver for WGU. The number two was that it was online and easily available. And probably the I'll say number three, but it went along with number two, is the fact that it's also self-paced. And you don't pay per credit hour. You pay for the semester or the term that you're in. So it's a flat fee for that term. And on average, you'll have about 12 to 14 credit hours per term. But say you get through those 12 to 14 credit hours of classes in the first 2 months of the 6-month term. Well, take another one. There are some terms that I've had 20 hours in, 20 or more hours in, because they're quick and easy to run through. I was able to effectively test out of the class, but they have absolutely no problem with, you start the class, you take the pre-exam to figure out where you need to focus on, and then, hey, wait, I got a 97% on the pre-exam. Let me just take the objective assessment, the final exam, and done. I've had at least 4 or 5 classes that I've tested the objective exam within the first week of the class and passed it. So
that's good, because there's nothing worse than having to take a class that you're like, I already know it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's one thing that's really drawn me, and I've really appreciated there, is the ability to speed it up with my industry knowledge, which a lot of school doesn't do that. You can CLEP out, but even CLEPing a class, it costs additional money to do that. So this is built right into the curriculum, and it makes it easy to speed up your matriculation.
Yeah, that's amazing. That sounds like a great program.
Yeah, so I know I had him do like this plug for it, but I feel like this is a question that's always asked of all of us is, do I need a degree? Do I need certifications? Do I need to go to a boot camp? And we know that it's not that way, but again, not everyone is hiring with that same mindset. So
right.
I have recommended people go to WGU when they have all of the competencies done, and now they just need to learn what they really need to do. And it's inexpensive compared to traditional school. And some of the exams are actually certification exams that are coupled into your tuition. So
exactly. That's the other thing.
And so I think if anyone who's on this call who continues to get you need that piece of paper comment, and you have everything you need, all they specialize is in IT, nursing, teaching, and business, because they want to provide degrees that get people jobs. And it's not to say that other degrees won't, but they want those degrees that people just want people to have, because they're constantly looking at in the industry hiring requirements. So
the certification
the
certification exams being the final exam for the class is amazing. I've gotten my A+, my Network Plus, a web design certificate, all off of that basis.
That wasn't in your resume. You should have.
Oh, not my project.
Good point. Yeah. It's not in your resume. You need to add those certifications.
Yeah, I need to pull it out because I think I have it on there, but it's in that skills stuff, I think. I don't remember if I left that in there or not.
Oh, actually it is. It is. You're right, but it's not.
Yeah,
Here, I'll-
it gets hidden. It gets hidden. And that's one of the things that I've been doing. I've actually been doing an open format for my resume where it puts it into a JSON format, and then I can apply templates to it to make it appear differently and play with the resume a lot easier than I can in Word. So it allows me to convert it to multiple formats too.
Yeah.
So Word, PDF, whatever, HTML. But another thing with WGU that I found interesting that I've never seen in another college is that when we had all of the flooding here in the Tulsa area, back, what was it, May of last year, I think it was, they actually reached out. So they have a team, a national team in the US that monitors natural disasters and things of that nature. And they apply geolocation to figure out if their students are in those affected zones. And if they are, they have your program mentor actually reach out and connect with you, see if there's anything you need from them, if they need to extend your classes, things like that. Rather, I've never seen that in a college. Usually it's up to the student to seek out support services, not the support services being sought out to the student. So
yeah, that's really good to know. I'm glad we had that conversation though, because, you know, going back to resumes, you know, you do have those certificates, but, you know, I didn't even see them because they were so buried in there. So but you caught that. And so you are changing that. So that's great. But, you know, even after sitting here and looking at your resume and talking about it for, you know, 10, 15 minutes, it took 15 minutes for me to see it. So that's
yeah, exactly. And that's usually beyond the FaceTime that your resume generally gets.
Yeah,
exactly. And so that's why we thought, let's do this live with a few members, because these conversations would stir up stuff that, again, if we just sent, here was A to B and how we got there, then we don't have this conversation of other things, and then you might be thinking about them. So thank you so much, Keith. I know we have a question in the chat. So, I mean, Dan and Keith, feel free to stay on. So a question that was asked, and we've had some response, but do y'all prefer a resume that looks modernized or looks appealing, or a basic black and white resume? So somebody, JP Billings, replied, I prefer a resume that is simply easy to find the key info. I've seen 4 to 5 page resumes, and I'm just like, I'm assuming it's like, okay, but what are your skills? So I don't have time to read this. And let's see, some people say I skipped this, and JP also said I skipped to the skills section, like to see, you know, that information. So your thoughts on what you've heard from hiring managers?
That's nice to see different opinions on that too, because, you know, like we said, you could show your resume to 10 people, they'll have 10 different answers. And that's a really good point to it. We keep saying, you know, go more than a page, but that made me think as well. Don't go 5 pages if you can at all prevent that. Now, there's some people who have 30 years of experience, and so it warrants being longer than a page and a half, which is understandable. But then you do have to consider, will this person read 5 pages? Like how you were saying, that person was like, nope, I'm not reading 5 pages. My master's degree is in industrial organizational psychology, which is about like the scientific research of the workplace. And a piece of that is resumes and what gets resumes noticed. And this is an area of the research that I find so incredibly interesting, to look at whether or not a black and white resume is more eye-catching or appealing, or do people actually look at it longer than an aesthetically pleasing resume, almost something like a graphic designer would create or something like that. And that's an area that scientifically hasn't been researched enough yet, because these like beautiful resumes are starting to become more popular nowadays, but there's not a lot of research that says whether or not they're actually effective. But there are some drawbacks to them, in that an applicant tracking system isn't good at parsing your information. So that is something to be very careful of. Now, I think it was Dan who said, I reach out to recruiters directly. That's a great resume to send directly to a person, because every time I get something that's aesthetically appeasing, I do look at it longer. Like, I've just noticed that in myself. That's one of the things I mentioned to Neil was, his color in the resume just made me look at it longer, but don't sacrifice the quality of your information for your resume to be pretty. I would prefer a black and white quality resume over a pretty resume, hands down.
JP kind of mentioned, maybe someone who has 30 years of experience, it could kind of differ. One of the things that I always heard, and I think it just depends, is if you have, usually people want to know, what have you done the last 10 years? If you can group other things, I think that's where Keith's, this many years of experience to a skill is helpful, because if you've been, for example, for me, I've worked in higher education and training and development a lot, and now I'm working with entrepreneurs. Does somebody want to know I was an engineering academic advisor back in 2003? Does that apply to necessarily what I'm doing? Not necessarily. So now if I was applying for a college, I could say, hey, I've had this higher education experience, so that's relevant. But then what I've done before is coupled it and said, 15 plus years of higher education experience in those profiles or objective sections or skills sections. So that helps to kind of reduce all of the other jobs you've had, not to minimize them, but it just, if you're saying, and I know Dan was saying, my background isn't necessarily in this. I've been doing, I believe it was like business development. It's great that he put that together. I see this a lot with veterans. You've had, 15 to 20 years of experience that should not be dismissed. So how do you tailor your military career into maybe 3 things that show that leadership capability? It's maybe written in a way, which I'll totally plug. My brother has a company called purepost.co, and you can get a free resume if you're a veteran. And it's just a software they've created, and it takes all of that military jargon and puts it into civilian HR hiring terms. Because at the end of the day, only 1% of the people in the United States served in the U.S. military. So you can't expect people to all understand 1% of the population. So that might help you to reduce some of the additional jobs and information you have by saying, okay, well, maybe you were in operations previously. We'll say you have 5 years of operational experience or logistics. And that's great, because they know, hey, Keith could take this project and he could run with it because he has that operations and logistics experience that's more valuable to the project management. But they may not understand that military side of it.
Yeah. So that's actually one thing that I had. That's one of the reasons that I have a skills-based resume like that, is because, as you probably noticed, I have a biology degree. I was pre-veterinary before I got into tech, and I didn't get into vet school. It's really difficult, about a 5% acceptance rate. But I had to stop and think, how am I going to, where am I going to go from here, basically? And when I decided on tech, I thought, how am I going to best position myself to get into tech? Because I don't have any real, experience there. What I realized is there are a lot of skills that people don't realize that cross-apply, that do cross-apply. And that's one thing that I've actually gotten really good at, is you can tell me what you do on a daily basis, and I can tell you in a generic idea what that means to an HR person. Like, okay, I was a vet tech for 6 years in my example. Okay, well, that's troubleshooting. Troubleshooting biological systems is a lot like troubleshooting computer systems. You have a known set of known quantities. You know how it's going to react to certain things, and by putting certain inputs into you'll get a certain result. And figuring out that pathway is very cross applicable.
Yeah, like that's a transferable skill from
Right.
one area
But
to another.
it's not something that most people would think about.
Mhm.
Being another thing is, on being a veterinary nurse, I have to, hop between doing blood work 1 minute to doing an x-ray to being back in surgery. Now I've got to do an exam on an animal. That kind of quick task switching is very valuable in a lot of technical applications.
Yep, that's absolutely very true.
So that's right, exactly. And that's one of those things that I had to learn how to translate my medical experience into a technical jargon world. And so that's one of the reasons I went with that skills based, is so I could highlight those jobs but remove them from the actual work experience because they're not pertinent to tech.
Nice. Good. So I think the moral of that story is if you're struggling to find out how to make your experience relevant, reach out to Keith.
Right.
He can help you out. But I think
I can, and I have for a multitude of my friends, because that's one of those things that I think people struggle with, and you really need to have on there. So